But Cambridge University Press called, and they have this series of fundamentals of neuroscience. And they wanted to include intelligence. And I regarded that as a major step, because intelligence research really has been relegated almost to the peripheral of mainstream psychology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
and
it's politically suspect, to say the least.
Yeah, and, you know, the switch happened overnight from being in the mainstream to being really peripheral in about 1969. Before 1969, almost everyone who was interested in education was concerned about the achievement gaps.
Right.
And they felt universally that once you equalized educational opportunities, those achievement gaps would disappear pretty fast.
Yeah, that was the Head Start push.
Well, yeah, even before Head Start. It came to Head Start, but even before Head Start, there were all these demonstration projects. There was the Miracle in Milwaukee, and there were all these things that showed that if you really intervened in early childhood education, which at that time was called compensatory education. The early childhood education term came much later. But this idea of compensatory education really took off. And then in 1969, the Harvard Educational Review asked one of the foremost educational psychologists, Arthur Jensen, to write a review of the progress. And this article in 1969 has become infamous. The opening sentence was essentially, we've tried compensatory education and it has failed.
Yeah.
And then he had 100 pages of detailed statistical analysis of why there were you couldn't demonstrate an increase in IQ score in any of these programs. Now, Head Start had just begun, so Head Start wasn't included.
Yeah, but I reviewed the literature on Head Start too extensively, and basically what happened was that so that was, for those of the viewers who don't know, Head Start was a nationwide attempt to add additional education to the lives of disadvantaged kids, especially at the preschool level. And basically what happened was that they actually did show improvements in academic achievement initially. So in grade 1 and grade 2, they were performing above their peers, but then the difference in performance started to decrease, and then by about the grade 5 or grade 6, the differences had disappeared completely. So there was no evidence whatsoever of that either of a stable one-time long-term gain in cognitive ability, or what people were really hoping was that if you intervened early enough, you'd get something that would sort of would turn into a positive feedback loop, and the gains would actually advance across time. And what ended up happening with the Head Start research basically was the conclusion that it produced no cognitive improvements whatsoever, although more kids who went through Head Start graduated from high school. Fewer of them were delinquent. Fewer of them became pregnant in the teenage years, and more of them went to colleges. But that seemed to be because they were better socialized, not because they were in any way had been made smarter. So that was a really tremendous disappointment, because it was a bipartisan attempt to come to grips with the fundamental issues that sort of bedeviled structural poverty in the United States. No one was happy about that outcome, I can tell you.
Well, not only that, but when Jensen published his article, he also said that since IQ increases seem not to be coming from these intense environmental interventions, we should consider the possibility that these differences have a genetic component. And that really began the incendiary descent of intelligence research to the periphery. Because the reaction against that was universal, because it implied a genetic inferiority if you didn't have genes for IQ.